This setup or variation of a hip flexor PAILs rails or hip extension PAILs rails, same difference, is one of my favorites for getting a little bit more feedback and just being able to produce a little bit more tension to get more out of the exercise. I'm going to show you my setup a little awkwardly so you can actually see the movement. This is how I would prefer to do the setup so this leg is free, but to show you what I am talking about, I'm going to set it up like so that you can actually see what I'm doing. So the goal here is to first find a front of your hip or hip flexor stretch. So to do that, sometimes people can already feel it in this position. Many people cannot, and we need to learn how to bring the top of the front of your pelvis up and stay tall. So we don't want to be crunching down. We want to stay tall, but bring that up. You should feel a little stretch here. If you still don't, you can place your hand on the lowest part of your back and push into your hand, but not leaning away, right? We want to stay tall, stay glued to the squat rack, but kind of learn how to posteriorly tilt that pelvis. Once you feel a moderate amount of stretch in the front, you might be holding the stretch for that day, and if you are, you're gonna start at that 30 to 60 second mark, working up to the 2 minutes. But if you are not, you might just be doing the PAILs rails, which is what I like this position for specifically. So the PAILs are what we start with every time. That's gonna be contracting this stuff. We're going to be thinking about doing this movement, driving the knee forwards. However, we are going to be blocked by the squat rack. So we are going to think about driving our leg into the squat rack, and we're going to get really up close and personal with the squat rack and slowly kind of pull our thigh into that pull, and you should feel all of the front of your hip muscles that are on stretch start to contract. You're going to want to start light at that 10 to 20%, slowly ramp up your intensity to that moderate or max, depending on what your program is for that day, over 10 seconds. Then you're gonna hold for the prescribed amount of time, and then you are going to ramp down and relax those muscles. That's the end of your PAILs contraction. We're going to follow with rails. So we're going to stay tall. We are going to start to squeeze your glute, and we are thinking about driving the leg behind us while pushing the front of our hip into the squat rack. So you're going to feel your glute kind of open the front of your hip. This should feel like you are pulling yourself deeper into a stretch. If you do, and the stretch is intensifying, you're doing it right. If you feel your glute working really hard, you're doing it right. You want to slowly work the intensity up, starting at 10 to 20%, and then slowly go up to the desired intensity for that day, over 10 seconds, hold for the desired amount of time, and then slowly ramp down. And that would be the end of one round of your PAILs rails. You might be doing a couple, or you might be moving on to something else after, but that would be one round. Things we want to pay attention to when we're doing this are that we aren't moving our pelvis all over the place. We are trying to stay in this plane of motion. When a lot of people start to try to do PAILs and rails, they start to rotate away and towards. So when you're doing your rails, we don't want to kind of really like arch our back or feel that our pelvis is shifting. We want to stay really tall and give that squat rack a nice big squeeze so that you can make sure you're generating the tension where you want it to go. So you're actually training what you want, which is what makes that exercise more effective. Overall, as you're consistent with this exercise, you should notice that you get a little bit more control of those muscles, that you can generate more tension, and overall, basically, that you can produce more active hip extension, which is important for things like walking and running. So make sure that you're really consistent with this, give this your all, and be patient over time, and you should see progress.